Looks like it's open season on Nintendo Switch.
Why did I move here? I guess it was the weather.
Where'd you move here from? Dumbsville?
Yo, I hit the jeweler, got some goals. I sold a little weed, but I could never sell my soul. And when I'm in LA, you find me out in Lil Soap. Come a bogo with my ramen, I'ma need another bowl. Let's go.
Oh, why, hello there, everyone. Weird weather we're having today, huh? Sorry for the mess. I didn't take into account that Kanye West would turn everyone into a vampire. So I'm kinda just locked down here for now. Thankfully, I have a copy of Open Season, the video game, to keep me busy. I'm sure nothing will go wrong. So yeah, they made an open season video game. And if you're asking why, well, it was 2006. That kinda explains itself. And you know what? Unlike the Alpha and Omega video game, which was made by a literal nobody, this game was actually made by Ubisoft. That's right, the guys who sell NFTs and harass with- no, not that company. Yeah, that They made an open season video game in 2006, and it's still better than Rainbow Six Extraction. Anyways, I'm playing the PC version, but this game was also released on the GameCube, the PS2, the Wii, the Xbox, and the Xbox 360. In case you wanna, you know, play this yourself. Which I'm just saying, it costs a lot less than fucking Battlefield 2042. Anyways, let's just jump into it. Anyways, presentations up first, and yikes. This has to be one of the best looking games of all time. Real-time ray tracing, dynamic environments, dynamic facial expressions, high-quality texture work, high-quality fur physics, dynamic Ashton Kutcher tessellation. Okay, but all joking aside, yeah, this game looks kinda... To give the game credit, it's a 2006 licensed game, built on primarily PS2 hardware. But I mean, at the same time, this was built on the Unreal Engine 2, which was used to power games like SWAT 4 and Republic Commando, which compared to those games, this game just looks really flat. The textures are all really muddy and low quality. The character models are...
What about Dinkelman? Do you have Dinkelman with you?
It's just really unappealing visually. However, the same can't be said for the Xbox 360 version, which has better lighting and texture work, and much nicer looking environments. No, it's not God of War 3 or anything, but the difference is almost night and day. So I see what's going on here. Presumably, this game was made for the Xbox 360 first, and then downgraded for PS2 hardware. This was sadly a pretty common practice back in the day. But since the Wii and PS2 were weaker yet better selling hardware, and since the Xbox and GameCube were similar in scope, all of this does pretty much make sense. But what doesn't make sense is the terrible PC port. So, as also common practice of the time, it's this PS2 and original Xbox version that would then get ported over to PC. So all those fancy lighting effects from the 360 version are just gone in the PC version. So the game already looks worse when it really shouldn't. However, I can at least say the game runs at 60 frames and I can run it in 4K, even if it looks like absolute dog shit. However, changing your resolution is the only option you have. That's right, this is the options menu. This is the definition of bare bones PC port. Also, there's no controller support, which means you had to play this platformer game with a mouse and a keyboard, and it's about as awkward as you expect. So yeah, not a great port. However, as we all know, this franchise is known for its amazing narrative quality. So as per usual with movie licensed games from this era, especially ones that weren't at the time established franchises, the plot largely follows the first movie, only with the plot itself being extremely abridged and with random bullshit taking up entire levels, if not multiple levels. The biggest offender for me being the final level. So at the end of the first movie, there's a giant battle scene between the animals and the hunters, but of course they also have to, you know, prepare for battle. So some genius developer over at Ubisoft went, hey, what if we stretch out the preparation to like 4 or 5 levels? I kid you not, near the end of the game, they just start throwing fetch quests at you. And the game will do this multiple times throughout, just stretching out anything into an entire level, with little to no variation or cohesion. There are certain parts of the movie that are just gone too. The parts that would have made decent levels, I think. Like the part where Boog rips out Ashton Kutcher's intestines. It's just completely gone. The story-based cutscenes are also hysterical. In comparison to the pacing of the movie, they feel so rushed. They were clearly on a low budget, so they couldn't actually do anything. For example, when you free Ashton Kutcher from the hood of his car, the bad guy Shaw then comes out and just starts talking to you.
I saw you one time, my dear. You think that makes you like me?
There's also a gas station level based on the twerking boog scene. However, there is no twerking boog in this level, so already the story is dog shit. But there is a scene where you run out and get shot, and then the bear owner lady and the one old guy from the first movie, they don't talk at the lady's home like in the first movie. No, they talk in the middle of this alleyway while Boog is lying unconscious on the ground. There's also this really weird opening scene with Boog's stuffed toy Dinkelman. I think it's meant to be a tutorial level, but you're just chasing around this giant Dinkelman toy. It's really weird and trippy and never happened in the first movie. But honestly, I kinda wish it did. It's just so weird and trippy and out of nowhere. However, the rest of the cutscenes are honestly really horrible and boring. A good majority of the cutscenes are just NPCs just talking to you, and it's really boring. Not only that, but they're relentless and everywhere. You can't go 5 minutes without Ashton Kutcher buzzing in your ear.
Hiding is a delicate art requiring much skill.
I'm trying to listen to the new Robert Palmer tape, but
Ashton Kutcher
keeps buzzing in my ear.
I mean, I like Kojima games and I'm complaining about this. That's when you know you've done something wrong. Leave it to Ubisoft to somehow find a way to make open season the most boring shit possible. There's also this one really weird part, where in the scene in the movie where Boog is at Shaw's cabin, and after you beat this level, you're given a choice to either go home or go back to the woods. However, this doesn't really matter at all, because going home reveals that you were heading in the direction of the forest the whole time. But heading back to the forest still leads you back to the forest? Man, I love it when games give me pointless fake choices. But the epitome of pure laziness has to be the ending. So you have one final boss fight with Shaw, and after beating him, you get one final narrative reward. And that narrative reward is, I kid you not, a Windows Movie Maker slideshow of the ending. No sounds or anything either. You get music and a slideshow. They couldn't be fucked to actually put in any dialogue or anything. It's just one massive slideshow. Oh, also, during cutscenes, there's a nodding mechanic, where you have to simulate nodding your head up and down after a character asks you a yes or no question. Yes, you heard me right. Not only is this completely pointless, but it also literally does not work. This mouse jittering is me trying to do this mechanic. Why is this a thing? So yeah, the story is mid-2000s licensed game. It's really rushed and pretty lazy. But now let's talk gameplay. The real meat and bones and the reason why you're pretty much here in the first place. Well, sorry to say, but first of all, this game isn't nearly as good as Dead or Alive Extreme 3.
But it does get me harder though.
So, Open Season, the video game, is a platformer, but I'm not entirely sure if that's the right word for it, since you can't even jump for most of the game. Most of the time, you're playing as Boog, whose means of traversal is only walking and running. This makes Boog a really stiff character to control. In fact, the only other movement option you really get is an upgrade to your run, where instead of your run being a light 2-footed jog, it's now a full 4-foot sprint. But that's kind of all the movement options you have, making Boog really slow and boring to actually control. Or, as the hip gaming journalists would say, it really makes you feel like Boog. The level design also complements this, by being mostly comprised of enclosed straight lines. Oh, you want to talk linear? This shit is the linearest of linear. This game makes a Call of Duty campaign look like Dying Light 2. Kind of ironic since this is a Ubisoft game, the company who would go on to make a billion bloated, boring open world games. So in a backhanded way, I kind of appreciate it. Furthermore, I mentioned earlier how most of the game is just fetch quests and doing tasks and favors to gain the trust of other animals. Yeah, I wasn't joking about that. A lot of these levels are built around just finding stuff for other animals. Sometimes they barely even function. This makes the levels feel more obligated than natural, making the game in general feel more repetitive. There's also a stealth mechanic. Yeah, not even joking. So throughout the game, to defeat these enemy hunters, you have to sneak behind them and scare them. When you do, you kind of enter a sneaking phase, where this circle pops up. And very similar to Squid Games, you have to play a game of red light, green light. You sneak up when it's green, and you press the disguise button when it's red. When you're up close, this prompt will pop up. This will then allow the scare bar to come up, and you have to hit the red part of the scare bar. This will allow you to roar XD your enemy, and remind them that they're in an open season video game. Nobody else hears your roar XD though, which makes zero sense. This mechanic is overall really boring. It's really slow and it's really tedious. Thankfully, there's a better way, the combat system. So when an enemy detects you, it actually takes them a while to pull out their weapon. My advice is to sprint face forward at them, pick them up, and then just throw them at something. Preferably another enemy, but over a cliff and murdering platforming them will do. You can then scare them and the red bar will be much larger in this phase, leading to a much easier scare. Unironically, I had much more fun doing this. Not only is throwing people at each other really funny, but it's also a lot faster. You can take out a lot more enemies in a lot less time with this method than with whatever the hell the stealth mechanic is supposed to be. Speaking of throwing objects, there are items you can throw too. You can throw skunks to stun enemies. You can shoot bunny rabbits, which puts you in this horrible first-person mode and forces you to watch this really long cutscene of the bunnies doing your mom. This happens every single time. And you can even throw Ashton Kutcher off of a fucking cliff. I really only use these though when they were required. They're usually really clunky and force you to come to a standstill to actually aim and throw. In other words, using these animals is actively a chore. You're better off using the old combat mechanic way. It's not great or intuitive or anything, but it gets the job done. Oh, and speaking of Ashton Kutcher, there's some levels where you actually get to play as him. And he actually has a jump button? And while the platforming is extremely basic, I actually had fun platforming in this game? Don't get your hopes up though, these levels still kinda suck. First of all, you still have to deal with enemies. And the way you do that is by twerking at them, which makes them put down their guns for no reason and start chasing you. You then have to lead them into these bear traps. And this all works? Not at all. This makes you way more vulnerable and defenseless, as well as out in the open, causing you to die a lot more often than you should. Furthermore, any degree of fun these levels would have is ruined by some shitty gimmick that all these levels seem to have. Whether it's carrying around a chainsaw that doesn't work at all, or carrying around propane tanks that make you even more vulnerable, these tacked on gimmicks really ruin these levels for me, and lead to loads of frustration. There are also these on-rail segments, where essentially you're put on this uncharted set piece, and have to press the jump button to avoid obstacles. These exist, I guess. They're very simplistic, but I enjoyed them for the spectacle. And then there are turret segments, which make me want to kill myself. These are so boring. You're essentially put at this standstill, and forced to shoot enemies that come out of the woodwork. They're boring, tedious, and should not exist. And they're really only here to pad out game time, which I can pretty much say for most of this game. A lot of this is really basic stuff, but extended way longer than it should be, which is really weird since the game is only around 3 hours long. This game is quite literally full of filler content, and still can't hit that 4-hour mark. That's how you know this game was cheap. And in conclusion, that's kind of the best way to describe it. This game feels cheap and rushed. When it comes to 2006 licensed games, this is the most licensed game you'll get. A 3-hour long, cheaply made platformer that somehow still finds a way to overstay its welcome. This is certainly a movie licensed game. From the stiff and basic controls and level design to the dictionary definition of tacked on story, this is exactly the game you expect it to be. A cheap licensed product. It's certainly not good, but I can't even say it's horrible either. It's just kinda mediocre. Still, it is a relic from a bygone era. And as much as I do indeed love the art of video games, this game did remind me of that era. An era, for better or for worse, we'll probably never see again. Overall, this is certainly open season the video game. But Dead or Alive Extreme 3 is the better game.
Fuck you in the lanes you came with. Me and you ain't on the same shit. You ain't in my lane, bitch, nah. Throw that shit in fifth, rollie on my wrist. Ay, baby, you a star, I'm my only wish. I'm counting blue honeys, I'm too money. Ay, and my little bitch, she too lovely. Yeah, hanging up and calling me right back. Ay, baby, why you calling me like that? Yeah, getting high with the seat, lay back. Baby, gon' relax, yeah. Hey, they don't know the half, yeah. No matter what happened, I got your back. Baby, that's the facts, yeah. That's the facts, yeah. We can fight, but the feeling's gone. I try to find the words, but they never come. I can still see you on the lawn. Hey, laying outside in the summer sun. Yeah, we can fight, but the feeling's gone. I try to find the words, but they never come. I can still see you on the lawn. Hey, baby, that's the facts, yeah. That's the facts, yeah.
But yeah, there's many humor and jokes on here that I think are pretty funny. Like, if we go over here, we'll find a bar named Jizzy Jim's, like jizz, like cum, you know, you get it? Yeah. So yeah, it has humor, and